They reapproved it. After 2 federal courts struck it down, after millions of acres of damaged crops, after farmers in Arkansas, Missouri, and Illinois watched their fields curl up and die, the Environmental Protection Agency brought it back on February 6, 2026. The chemical is called Dicamba, and experts have called what it did to American farms the worst herbicide drift event in the history of agriculture in the United States. In 2018 alone, 1 in every 6 acres of sensitive soybeans in this country was injured by drift from this single spray, more than 15 million acres in one growing season. And this is the chemical the EPA just put back on the market, with restrictions that critics say are actually weaker than the ones 2 federal courts already threw out. Before we go further into what they approved and what they did not tell you, if this story matters to you, the best way to make sure this information keeps moving is simple. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you do not miss the follow-ups, and share this with a farmer who needs to hear it before planting season starts. Now let me walk you through what is actually inside this decision, because the details are worse than the headlines. I put together a complete reference guide that breaks down every restriction in the new label, every court ruling that led to this moment, and the exact temperature and timing windows where drift becomes a real risk for your fields. The link is the first thing in the description below, and I will come back to it in a few minutes with everything that is inside. For now, let me show you how we got here, because the background matters. Dicamba is not a new chemical. It was first registered in 1967, and for decades it was used carefully at narrow times of the year because growers and applicators knew it could damage almost any broadleaf plant nearby. That changed in 2016. The EPA approved new versions of Dicamba for over-the-top spraying on genetically modified soybeans and cotton, crops that had been engineered by Monsanto, now owned by Bayer, and by BASF, to survive direct dicamba applications during the growing season. The promise was a tool to kill weeds that had become resistant to glyphosate, weeds like Palmer amaranth and water hemp that can grow 3 inches a day and shut down an entire field if left alone. Before I show you what happened next, I want to know something. Tell me in the comments what country you're watching from, and whether you grow soybeans, cotton, vegetables, or whether you live next to a farm that does. I want to see how many growers around the world are dealing with the same drift question at the same time, because this is no longer just an American problem. And if you are not subscribed yet, this is the moment, because what comes next will change how you read every herbicide label that comes through your barn. The first full season of widespread over-the-top dicamba use was 2017. By the end of that year, the EPA had logged 2,700 official crop injury investigations across 25 states, with 3.6 million acres of soybeans damaged in 12 months. This is exactly why I built the complete reference package, linked in the description. Inside, you get the full dicamba timeline from 2016 to today, every federal court ruling and what the judges actually wrote, the new 2026 label placed side by side with the old one so you can see exactly what changed, a clear breakdown of buffer zones and temperature rules, and a practical drift protection checklist for your operation. One access, the full file, yours permanently. The link is the first thing in the description below this video. Now let me show you what happened when the courts got involved, because that is where the story turns. The New York Times reported that dicamba drift wiped out roughly 4% of the entire United States soybean crop in 2017. Arkansas alone reported close to 1 million damaged acres in a single season. And in Missouri, the drift damage was so severe that one farmer was killed in a dispute with a neighbor over spraying. If you grow non-tolerant soybeans, vegetables, fruit, ornamentals, or anything else near a field where dicamba may be sprayed this season, the buffer distances, the temperature thresholds, and the early warning signs of drift exposure are all laid out in the reference package linked in the description. Grab it before you need it, not after the damage is already on your leaves. It is the same document I would want in my own pickup truck if I farmed within 5 miles of a soybean field this year. Now back to the courts. In 2020, the United States Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit struck down the EPA's original dicamba registration. The judges wrote that the agency had substantially underestimated the risks of the herbicide and that the damage was undisputed. The EPA went back, wrote new rules, and re-registered the product within months. In February of 2024, a federal court in Arizona vacated the registration a second time. This time the court ruled that the EPA had violated public input requirements under the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act when it pushed through the 2020 reapproval. 2 federal courts, 2 registrations thrown out in 4 years. That is the legal record this new approval is built on top of. And here is the part most coverage leaves out. In 2021, the EPA's own Office of Inspector General published an investigation into the original 2016 approval. That investigation found that important scientific evidence had been excluded during the first rush to approve dicamba for over-the-top use. Internal agency scientists had raised concerns about drift, about volatility, about damage to neighboring crops, and those concerns did not make it into the final decision. That is the closest direct answer we have to the question of what was hidden, and it came from the EPA's own watchdog office, not from an outside critic. To understand why dicamba keeps drifting no matter what is written into the label, you have to understand what makes this chemical different from almost every other herbicide on the market. Most herbicide drift is particle drift, fine droplets carried by the wind at the moment of spray. Dicamba does that too, but its much bigger problem is volatility. On a hot, humid day, hours or even days after the spray has dried on the leaves, dicamba can vaporize and lift off the field as an invisible gas. It forms what scientists and reporters have started calling dicamba clouds, drifting across roads, fences, and property lines. Non-tolerant soybeans, the ones not genetically modified to resist it, are extraordinarily sensitive. Studies at the University of Nebraska found that doses as small as 1/1000th of the label rate can cause 50% visual injury to those plants. That is why the damage spread so far, and why neighbors with conventional soybeans, vegetables, fruit trees, or even backyard tomatoes can lose a season to a spray they never authorized and never applied themselves. Now to what just happened. On February 6th of this year, the EPA approved 3 dicamba products for over-the-top use on cotton and soybeans for the 2026 and 2027 growing seasons only. The agency called these the strongest protections in agency history. The new label cuts the total annual amount of dicamba a farmer can use roughly in half, doubles the required drift reduction agents, requires runoff and erosion mitigation points, and restricts applications during the hottest days. But here is what critics are pointing to. Previous registrations had a hard cutoff date around mid-June for soybeans, after which all spraying was banned to avoid the worst summer heat and the worst volatility. That hard cutoff is gone. In its place is a temperature rule that allows year-round application, with reduced acreage restrictions only on days between 85 and 95 degrees Fahrenheit, and a full prohibition above 95. Tank mix reviews for combined drift risk are no longer required under the new registration. Crop growth stage restrictions from earlier labels are also gone. And the EPA has acknowledged in its own statement that it has no field staff actively monitoring pesticide use, which means enforcement depends almost entirely on state agencies and complaint-based investigations after the damage has already happened. There is also a health dimension to this story that most headlines skip. A 2020 study published in the International Journal of Epidemiology followed nearly 50,000 pesticide applicators in the long-running agricultural health study. Roughly half of them had used dicamba in their work over the years. The applicators in the highest quartile of dicamba exposure showed elevated risk of liver and intrahepatic bile duct cancer and of chronic lymphocytic leukemia. A separate Canadian study linked dicamba exposure to roughly twice the risk of non-Hodgkin lymphoma in farmers. The EPA states that residues on food remain within levels it considers safe, and that there is no unreasonable risk to typical consumers under the new label. The studies showing elevated cancer risk involve applicators with decades of intensive occupational exposure, not people eating soybean oil or wearing cotton shirts. That distinction matters, but it also means the people most exposed to the highest risk are the farmers, farm workers, and applicators handling the product directly in the field. So where does this leave a grower for 2026? If you grow dicamba-tolerant soybeans or cotton, you have a tool back in your hands for resistant weeds, with a label that is more restrictive than ever on paper. If you grow non-tolerant soybeans, vegetables, fruit, ornamentals, specialty crops, or anything else in a region where dicamba is being sprayed, you are exposed. The new label requires a 240-foot downwind buffer. That distance is not even close to what dicamba clouds did in 2017 and 2018, when documented drift moved miles in some confirmed cases. Endangered species mitigation points are required in pesticide use limitation areas, but enforcement on the ground is still unclear. This approval is only valid for the 2026 and 2027 seasons, which means a third court challenge is almost certainly coming, and the same legal questions that defeated the last 2 registrations are not going away. In the meantime, the practical takeaway for any grower watching this is straightforward. Document everything if you suspect drift on your land, photograph the damage, note the date, the time, the wind direction, and the air temperature. File complaints with your state Department of Agriculture as quickly as you can, because some states have very short windows for filing, and your right to file lapses fast. Talk to your neighbors before the season starts, not after the damage is already visible. And read the actual label, not the marketing brochure, because the legal restrictions printed on that label are what protect you and what you can hold the applicator to if something goes wrong on your land. Everything I just walked through, the full timeline, the court rulings, the label changes, the buffer rules, the temperature thresholds, the drift mechanics, and a practical complaint and protection checklist is inside the reference package, linked in the description below this video. One access, the full file, yours permanently. Grab it now before planting. Season pulls you in 20 different directions, and you forget where you saw this video. The link is the first thing in the description. Before you click off, do me one favor. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell, because I am going to keep tracking this decision, the court challenges, and the field reports as the season unfolds. Drop a comment below telling me what you grow and what you're watching out for this year. Like the video so it reaches more farmers and growers who need to see it before they plant. And share it with anyone you know who is planting near a soybean or cotton field this spring, because the more people who understand the rules, the fewer fields end up curled, brown, and worthless by July. 2 federal courts said no to this herbicide. The EPA said yes anyway. How the season plays out is going to be decided in the fields, in the courts, and in the complaints that get filed by farmers like you. You have a voice in this, and so do the people watching this video right now. Keep your eyes on your fences, your nose to the wind, and your camera in your pocket this summer. I will see you in the next one.